Hi, this is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector, and welcome to another Candid with Bob podcast webinar. I have a special guest, Julie Candelone, with me. We're going to talk about some interesting roadblocks and challenges for marketing. I think it'll be fun and entertaining. I encourage our guests to participate. I see some friendly faces out there, Tom, Matt, etc. Nice to see you all. And Julie, welcome. Nice to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And if you can, for the folks that don't know, if you can introduce yourself and maybe a fun fact about you that people wouldn't know from looking at LinkedIn.
All right. So yes, I'm a fractional chief marketing officer. I'm based in San Francisco, and I have 20 years of experience driving revenue, growth, and marketing for B2B tech and service companies. I focus on high growth startups, scaling corporations from Series B all the way to big brands like Nvidia, Amazon, and RingCentral. I'm a full stack marketer, and what I'm having the most fun with is everything related to go to market strategy, demand gen, and operations. And so, maybe the fun fact about me is that about 10 years ago, I had a very pivotal moment in my career when a CEO told me, Julie, no one gives an F about marketing. And so it became really a moment in my career because, well, at first I was in shock. I just really didn't understand how nobody could really enjoy fully and appreciate marketing the way I did. I was really captivated by marketing and I couldn't understand that. But after a little bit, I really pivoted in thinking, how can I really reconsider how to approach marketing based on what he had just said? And now I really try to position myself more as a change agent more than a marketer, and I go and work with all the different departments. I'm trying to be the growth architect that's going to make everyone align on business outcomes and do it very fast. And because of that, I'm able to double pipelines in a matter of a few months, meet revenue goals, create a culture of change and growth, and that is really something that's made me successful, and I associate that to that moment in time. Um, so that's my fun fact.
That's great. That was really encourage you to prove yourself and to prove the value,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
And
Mhm.
everybody wants growth. So good. So I have some polls if we can get some responses out there. Let's see. So the first poll. So we're going to talk about several different roadblocks that marketers are challenged with. One of them is around global marketing and trying to localize the messaging. So here's the first poll. Get some responses from our audience. And so, Julie, you've had the opportunity to market from the U.S. to Europe, and and also the other way around, I guess.
Yes, so I'm French. I've moved to the US 18 years ago. So my experience is mostly with American companies going global, but I've also worked with foreign companies trying to go to the US market. And really, there's a lot of differences in how businesses go after a foreign market. And I think sometimes marketing teams tend to forget that their way of doing things and their way of thinking about the funnel or even the customer experience is radically different from what it can be in another market. So, for instance, not to stereotype, but in the US, people are very ROI driven, they're faster moving, they're very open to innovation, being first adopters, etc. Whereas in Europe, not to say French, but Europe in general, people are more risk averse, they're more focused on relationships and proof driven over promises, you know. So that impacts a lot how you think about marketing. And what you can do in Silicon Valley, for example, will not fly in Germany. And you need to really understand how to ground your company, how to create local trust signals that are going to enable you to go after those markets. So what I like to think of is not to have an overall go-to-market playbook in those situations, but really have cultural validations and arm the sales team to go global, but with a local mindset, and really test the messaging and understand even the local procurement habits and politics in the market. On some markets, it's easier for me because I have that dual culture. On some others, like in Asia Pac, for instance, I really rely on a strong collaboration with sales. And so when I go after Japan or Korea, I need someone on the ground who has that understanding to help me redefine how we're going to do marketing, how we're going to come up with the messaging, the campaigns, even the web. I mean, think about how a website is designed in Japan compared to the US. There are very strong differences there. And so you need to understand that.
Interesting. So I think we've been talking about putting together this webinar for a while. Before we had these issues now with the tariffs and the counter tariffs and so forth. So what, how is that affecting your world, or how are you seeing the
So,
impacts?
interestingly enough, I think Europe is very familiar with how to deal with strong regulations, you know, because of all of the GDPR craziness, etc. It took us years to adjust to all of that new environment. And so the regulations around tariffs are a conversation, of course, and companies are trying to figure out how to adjust to that. There is some resentment towards the US. We were just talking about how difficult it can be right now for Americans to travel to Europe without hearing, you know, about how they're impacting the economy worldwide. Um, I think, you know, companies are in a wait and see situation. And someone shared with me very recently a fantastic article from HBR that was published in 2009 that was talking about how you need to adjust your segmentation in those downturn moments to stop just thinking about the firmographics and all of those elements, but be more thinking about segmenting based on how people are risk averse or not. And so you could have segments of people that are very much willing to keep going with business as usual, and segments of people that are more in the wait and see or absolutely not moving when it's not essential. And so if you're able to understand where those segments are and where your product lands in terms of is it an essential one or is it a luxury buy, then you can have a different marketing approach, and you can talk about a messaging, for instance, which is you cannot afford not to uh, afford this, right? And so you really need to rethink how you're going to market based on those behaviors.
Very good. All right. So I'm gonna end the poll and present the results. If anyone wants to comment on how they voted, please raise your hand or put something in the chat. Um, so understanding local buyer behavior is kind of the challenge. So it sounded like, Julie, you mentioned that you partner sometimes with local folks.
Yes, I think for me, the local mindset is too often about translation and not so much about understanding the local relevance. And 80% is knowing about the local pain points, the decision-making structure, the trust signals. And either you have that knowledge in yourself because you're very much, you know, deep into that culture, or you need to have someone who helps you decode all of that. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be deeply involved with you know, defining and just giving someone else's the responsibility to adjust to the local market. But I think to have a partner to run ideas by and to see how they react, and maybe have information about what is the partnership landscape like in that region. Maybe there are some segments that you will not go after just because you don't have the right partner framework, or you can think of maybe revisiting your go-to markets based on the behaviors locally. So I think it's really important to have a flexible approach while still being global. And I use a model to evaluate content through three filters all the time. One is cultural relevance, the other one is buyer readiness, and the last one is sales enablement utility. Because realistically, you're not going to try to localize everything you do in marketing. So you need to really pick your battles, unless you have an unlimited budget. And in that case, lucky you. But you need to really think about what is going to have the biggest impact with the smallest amount of resources. I also think about localization as a sales support function. I want each rep to have an outreach playbook that resonates with their local market. And so I'm defining local personas, just like I was describing personas based on their ability to engage in a downturn time or not. I think there are different personas based on different markets, and you need to readjust your playbook based off of that. So yeah, that's how I approach it.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, first thing I think of is translation, just being able to do, but that's just a very small part of it.
Hmm.
It's just the words. It's not
Exactly.
what are the key things to talk about and and the key focus and the key positioning. So
But I will say this, translation is a very small piece, but it needs to be done right because you have no idea how many times we're having fun with poorly translated content.
the Google Translate's not perfect.
Yes.
Now, I guess to another extent, when you were saying earlier that there's different people have aversions to technology and so forth. So that could be within the country too. So
For sure.
marketing to Iowa, nothing personal to Iowa, but is different than marketing to Silicon Valley.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And I mean, Silicon Valley is the bubble of all bubbles, right? What happens in Silicon Valley is absolutely not representative of everywhere else. That's for sure.
Um, okay, so I'm going to go to. Unless anybody wants to chime in on the global issues. Oh, so one other thing I wanted to ask you, so how are the large language models for you as far as localizing, getting into, are you using anything like ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others to try to do some of the translation, again, not just the word translation, but the positioning uh, ideas.
I have not, but that's an interesting thought for sure. I mean, there's an endless possibility of different use, right? I just have not thought about that.
Yeah,
Um, it's certainly something I would consider. Um, I'm interested more in understanding the differences in terms of how people are using AI in different markets and how they're searching on AI in different markets. And I'm just starting to scratch the surface of that. There are more and more tools that are becoming available for that. So, for instance, it would be interesting to be able to understand if there are any differences in terms of terms and level of questioning that is happening on different markets.
yeah, I agree. And and again, it's not, I'm learning that those large language models aren't perfect. They need to
Mhm.
be supervised, and they do hallucinate, and you
Yes,
know,
and so I mean, from a cultural standpoint, I would tend to trust more an individual than an LLM at that level.
yeah,
It's such
yeah,
a very tricky moment where you can really go wrong. So that feels too risky to me, and I'm a big AI proponent. So not that I don't like using AI, but for that specific use case, you would have to really triple check.
yep, makes sense. Okay, so next topic, I want to talk about a little bit about inter-organizational coordination and alignment and priorities. So you've got a lot of experience at that.
Yes, yes. Like I said, it's been one of my focuses for quite some time now, and I'm rarely hired, when things go well. People call me usually when marketing is gone bad, but the reality is, it's not necessarily a bad campaign that is making your marketing not efficient. Most of the time, it's the alignment within the company. It's the lack of culture and pushing all together in the same direction. And so, there are a few signs, that your go-to-market alignment is broken, and a few early signs for me is when in the leadership meeting you have slides being presented by each department separately. You don't have a joint dashboards. You're not working together on OKRs. You're not using the same vocabulary. There's no onboarding of new employees related to go-to-market and things like that. And so this for me is the very quick symptoms of something's not working. And so how do you work on really fixing all of that and aligning everyone? Um, it's not a meeting, it is a mindset. You really need to create that mindset before you can consider that fixed. And you need to also consider that there is potentially a language issue as a first problem to fix. And so, really understanding that sales focuses on accounts, marketing focuses on personas, and ops talks about metrics, etc. You need to bring back everyone to what are we trying to do as a business and get everyone speaking the same revenue language. I think that's a very important first step. I like to have what I call revenue architecture sprints, where everyone is going to go back to the roots and realign on ICP, the buyer journey. How do you define your funnel model? How do you consider attribution? Think about all the ways to really agree on how you're going to analyze your progress towards revenue. But those sprints are also an opportunity for everyone to push together towards, for instance, how do we increase the amount of demo requests that we are receiving? I think having a joint effort it's like trying to, I'm a sailor, I sail in the Bay Area, and when you think of people trying to get the sail up on the boat, if everyone is pushing at different moments, you're not going very fast. But if everyone pulls at the same time, in a coordinated way, the sail goes up right away. And for me, that's what marketing is about. It's really orchestrating for the whole company to push in the same direction at the same time. And that is where you have alignment. So within the marketing team, I'm also trying at every level of the team to create that sense of we're not just here to run campaigns and be in awe about the design of the website, etc. We're really here to make the business successful. And so I run what I call, I guess that's my French side that's coming out a bit. I run revolution rooms. And so I'm playing on the term revenue and revolution, but I want people to come in those meetings that are the revolution rooms meetings with the mindset of, okay, we're going to try to think differently. We're going to be bold, but we're going to try to push on this. And we're going to try to have an impact on this and think broadly throughout the company. How can we work with everyone to have an impact on this? What can we run experiments on? How can we create collaborations that are going to improve that? And that's really a mindset that I want at the leadership level, in the sales team, in the marketing organization. This is something that takes time, but is essential to find that alignment.
Beautiful. I'm gonna launch this poll, and then I'm gonna go back to our original topic of the globalization, because Tom Campbell has a good question that I want
Okay.
to. Let me bring him up and promote the panelists. Okay, and then I put the poll up. People can start answering the poll about the alignment issues, and then if you've got something to contribute, please raise your hand, or I'll actually look this time and see. So we do have another one. Okay, so yeah, people are okay. Tom, are you there? Are you able to talk?
I am. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Can you hear me?
I
Oh,
can hear you. No camera.
well,
No, no,
I've got to fix that. I don't know if
no
it's letting
camera.
me do camera, but
No camera required either.
gotcha. Okay, I would love to have it on if I can, but why don't we get going with this? So,
Okay.
first of all, thank you so much. This is great information. What I wanted to talk a bit about was the globalization part, because when I worked at Intel way back long ago in an agency that did Intel first, one thing that we came up as, and it sounded like a buzzword at the time, but I really think it's
Oh,
Did we lose him?
well, promoted him to panelist. Trying to get the
okay.
camera going. Okay, there we go.
Okay,
But
now let me make sure y'all can see me.
there
All
we
right, see me?
Oh,
go.
hi.
All right, thanks. Hi. Thank you, Bob. Great to meet you, Julie. One thing I wanted to mention, and this may be from now I did a lot of consumer, but my last work was very focused in B2B
Mhm.
globally. And so what I found from that also, great information, by the way, Julie. One thing I wanted to add to it is, first of all, I was talking about Intel. The first thing that I believe it was DSW partners, we brought this word and I thought it was a non-word, but we call it transcreation, which is a very important point to make because we can create the content, or we can translate the content, but we can't create it in the local market at all. To your point, it's a very good one. So we leave it to our local markets in order to take the messages that we need and move it forward. One thing in my last job that I found that was a obstacle to that, not an obstacle to that, but we need to take more steps beyond that. And the steps were mostly building. So what we did is we built a content library. Just to your point, a message of ROI may not work in another country. It may be more of how a more of a softer sell of how do you help your customers be better type of
Mhm.
thing and how our software does it, et cetera. So what I found actually that really worked well for us is to build a full content library with the input of your local salespeople, because that is to me the most important thing. They have the pulse on exactly what's going on, because we even found that there were differences between obviously areas in Europe, but within Germany, there's two different ways to talk to someone. Also, when you're talking to different levels of influencers versus the actual purchasers. And so what we found was a great way to do this is build a huge content library. In fact, I doubled the content library each year for 2 years. We ended up building one per week actually, on an average. And so what we have is that content library that's sitting out there now. The lucky thing for us is that we are a sell-through product. So we had that content not only for our salespeople, but for our partners who are selling us. So
Right.
now you have kind of I know we use this a lot, but Chinese menu orientation, but I think that's a good analogy to think of when you're thinking of your local markets. Because your local markets need to say, hey, I'm not trying to go on ransomware this time because everyone's talking about that. So let's talk about this here instead. This is more important in Australia than it is in Singapore, type
Mhm.
of thing. So I just wanted to add that little bit onto it in terms of because I loved the globalization is the localization of globalization is very important,
Mhm.
extremely important, and it's beyond the translation.
And I think you're making a very interesting point, about if you're going with a local partner, you also need to think about how are you arming that partner to really be
Exactly.
efficient for you. And content is one of those aspects, obviously.
Absolutely. So thank you. I just wanted to offer that up as well to you and the team.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. All right. So I'm gonna end the poll. Let's go back to the alignment issues. And so
All right.
finances, at least for this group, is not as big an issue. My background's finance. I used to be a CPA and a CFO before going to marketing, so I can definitely see the different perspectives. But sales operations, Julie, you mentioned, I think if we all align on sales, or more importantly, align around the customer or the client or whatever, that seems to be a good unifying focus.
You would think so, but sometimes it's even not enough, because there are tensions in how each territory is going after a different set of segments, and so it's not necessarily a unifying force. You really need to find a way to align on how is the business going to grow, what is the go-to-market strategy that we are going to all align on. This is a topic that requires efforts on an ongoing basis, especially when you have a CEO that has a new vision every 3 months, and kind of shifts everything around. You need to adjust, especially in smaller companies where they're trying to find their product market fit. This is really a constant effort to realign everyone. I'm finding interesting that no one is really listing finance as an issue because, well, you have some excellent CFOs that are really in touch with what is going on in the marketing world, but very often I find that there is a need for education because they're not necessarily understanding the concepts of attribution. They're not really well versed into how to think about a marketing budget breakdown between what is going to be having an impact short term versus thinking about the longer term of how do you build your brand. And so coming up with a way to plan together and then position marketing as an ally for forecasting by sharing data and being in communication on a regular basis, I think that is still not happening in many, many companies. And I see that as the next frontier. Once you've kind of really established your collaboration from a sales and operation standpoint, you need to have that ally in finance to be really successful.
Yeah. Just to putting my finance hat on for a moment. I have a hard time with brand, spending money on brand because you can't readily calculate an ROI from it.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so that's a tough one for me.
Right. And that's where you need to really be on the same page in terms of, okay, what are we really going to focus on short term for ROI? And then where do we agree we put the needle for building long term without necessarily being able to track attribution? And I mean, there are some interesting stats with advertising right now where, you know, click is no longer necessarily the best way to evaluate your advertising budget because people will just go to your website without clicking on the ad they just saw, or they might share that ad with someone that they're going with. It's huge numbers of people who have those behaviors. And so the whole concept of direct ROI is very tough. We still have, a way to go in terms of how we're evaluating marketing success.
Yeah, interesting. Um, I think you are usually or always a fractional marketing person when it comes to these interactions with the other departments. Are
Yes.
you dealing with fractional people in those departments too? Or are they typically more permanent, full-time?
Yes, yes, I've seen fractional CFOs, fractional chief product officers, um, fractional sales, fractional CROs. They're everywhere. There are as many ways of being fractionals as there are shades of gray, you know. So some fractional people are more recent fractional than others. I've been doing that since 2012. Um, in my mind, there is a misconception around being fractional, which is some people want it to be less hands-on and more like a consultative approach. I don't think that's being really fractional. When you're not immersing yourself in the company, you're kind of missing the value of really being a leader who drives alignment and who's able to create change. The reason why you would hire someone who's fractional before hiring someone full time is because you're going through a transition phase. And that transition phase can be very short or it can be a couple of years. But being able to bring in someone who is relevant from the get go on day one, who's able to go full speed and really bring value in a strategic and also execution. I think that's the value of fractional. It's not a band-aid. It's not something that is going to be, a short-term fix. It's a bridge to scale. Really think about being a fractional as taking you from point A to point B. And when you're at point B, usually that's where you need to transition to hiring someone full time. Before fractional was a term, I had a very hard time describing how I was working, and so someone recommended me to say that I'm the Mary Poppins of marketing, and that really worked well for a while because Mary Poppins joins the family when things are not going so well, right? And then Mary Poppins fixes everything, and then she flies away when everyone is happy again, you know. That's really the concept of being fractional in my mind.
I like that. And I think you also alluded to the fact that fractional is not being like a consultant and just, being on the outside and giving advice, but actually being on the inside, getting your hands dirty.
Yes, I really enjoy that part. And actually, I'm doubling down by being French because when I join a company, I tell them, I'm French. I'm very direct. I'm not gonna be here to give you BS. It's really going to be about everything that is happening in your company. You're not going to have everything hidden under the rug, and I'm going to fix. I'm going to take you to the next level. Maybe not fix everything. Some things don't require to be fixed, but really that transparency and truth level is it's painful because not everyone wants to hear the truth about why your company is not working and what is not going on that should be going on. But it's the value of bringing someone who's external and someone who's French.
Very good. All right, I'll launch this third poll on the fractional leadership advantage. Get an idea of people's experience with fractional. So fractional, I guess at least the term wise hasn't really been around. You've been around since it started, huh?
Yes, and it really picked in the last couple of years, I would say.
Yeah, yeah,
I think, with all the marketing budgets being frozen back in 2022, 2023, a lot of CMOs were let go, and there was this trend of, oh, maybe I don't need to be full-time again. Maybe I can take a breather because COVID was really harsh on a lot of marketing departments, right? Because we had to go full speed and transition on a lot of things. And so after COVID, I think a lot of people thought, fractional might be a breather for me. Well, the reality is that's not that easy, and it's very time consuming to work with multiple companies. But you've seen a lot of people really talk about that model more recently, for sure.
yeah. And COVID's definitely changed things, and so I guess fractional is usually not on site, but maybe a hybrid situation
No,
periodically.
I mean, before COVID, I was working out of my home 5 days a week. It's changed, and now it's not as often that I have to go on site. But fractional doesn't mean that you're not deep in the company.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So,
Tom has his hand raised. I don't know if you
oh,
see.
good,
But yeah,
good.
hey there. Back again. I hope I don't become annoying to you
Nice
all.
to see you again. No,
Um,
this is helpful, Tom. Thank you.
um, I related to this in the past question is I find that fractional can be very difficult because I find the biggest obstacle I found the biggest obstacle for marketing was the lack of understanding of marketing from the leadership board, from the leadership standpoint. And so, because Bob, I understand now. I grew up with a CFO from Silicon Valley. I grew up in Silicon Valley. Like my pop was at Fairchild when everyone else was there. So I grew up going into marketing with a father that said branding is worthless. You know. However, I worked with the number one branding company I would say in the world, Intel. Because the branding is important. So it really again depends on if you're sell to or sell through. Because if you're sell through, you need to have that branding to support your partners when they're trying to sell to their customers. And I had this like with my leadership because they did not understand that while we're getting partners telling them every week on a call, I need you to build my brand so I can get in the door. So and I found also that leadership I don't know if they are willfully ignorant or just ignorant of wanting to know some of the important details of marketing as well. You know, even down to the point of, um, why is it important to have a low bounce rate on your emails? I mean, I know it sounds like a weird thing to say to them, but I think they need to understand their database management, even down to that level. And now they don't have to understand it completely, but they don't get it when you're trying to pose when you have a budget that is 2% of your ARR, which should be 10. And you're trying to get things done in a very specific way. They balk at things that you want to do that are important for the even a base of management of things, or to be very frank, metadata on your website and how
Right. So
important,
the,
you know.
I
So yeah,
understand that because that's that pivotal moment that I was talking about, with that CEO telling me nobody gives an F about marketing. That's exactly
Exactly.
that. It came from that, exactly, and I think the trigger that happened for me was you need to really have empathy and ask yourself, okay, in my world, this is why I care about bounce rates. But how can I
Yes.
explain that in a way that the other person is going to care about? And having that constant work of transposing that into their world, how you explain the situation to them on how it's going to impact them, that is something that not everyone is comfortable doing in marketing because we're not trained on doing that, right? And the vendors
Exactly.
out there create reports and dashboards that are useful to you as a marketer, but not so much in terms of how do you translate that for a sales team and leadership. And so
Exactly.
empathy is something we are used to having for our customers and putting ourselves in their shoes, understanding their pain points. We need to learn how to do that internally as well.
I agree. And so I guess my theory, not even a theory, but my thought on what we're talking about right now is the fractional person. How invested are they in that level that they need to do, particularly for maybe a CFO or someone that's looking at spreadsheets all day long? How interested are they in learning that in order to understand it, in order to get it through, as a fractional level? So I guess I'm posing that as a question.
I guess that's the difference between a good fractional and a bad fractional.
Good point. Very good point, Julie. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So fractional and can last usually sometimes a short amount of time and sometimes could long time, could be forever.
Well, so I guess, like I said, there are very different models. The way I've been working for all these years is very simple. I don't like to take hostages, so my contracts have no end dates. But I tend to figure it out very quickly. If a company doesn't work well with me, the contract lasts less than 6 months. But if there is a good relationship and we're making progress, typically my contracts can be a year, 2 years, 3 years. After that, I'm usually the one recruiting my replacement because I'm not the kind of person who enjoys being in maintenance mode. And so it becomes a situation where I've really completely revamped all the different aspects that were needed to be revamped. We're on a new trajectory, and now we're more in a routine where the team has been rebuilt, the operations are working, etc., etc. And I think then you need to switch to having someone full time. Some fractional people I know are very much on the project mindset, like I said, and they can have very short contracts of a couple of months. I don't see that as an interesting opportunity. I think it's closer to the agency model, and I'm not interested in that as a
Yeah,
fractional.
that makes sense. Thank you for that. So James Miller, he's a Bay Area guy, has a question about full funnel branded demand. I'm going to ask James to join us with his question. So let me while he's coming up, I'll read what he wrote. So can I add to the brand question? We are seeing the full funnel brand to demand campaigns are more important with the zero click environment as we are moving from search engines
Hey Bob, can you
to,
see me?
here we go. James, here you go. Nice to see you.
Hi, James.
No, I can't hear you. Hold on a second here. Uh,
We can hear you.
sorry. Sorry, Bob, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask
I think
James's
it's on my
question.
end. I hear your mouth going. Um, I'll let you ask the question and leave it at that.
Okay, I'll leave the question and then if you can chime in, you can. Let's see. Let me see if I can. Oh, well, I'll read the question. So,
I'm gonna leave and come back into the webinar.
okay, thank you. We're seeing the full funnel demand, brand to demand campaigns are more important with the zero-click environment as we are moving from search engines to decision engines. Buyers need to have you on a short list before they have a problem that your company can help with. So, brand's a key thing to have, I guess, before people are even thinking about before they're in the market, I guess they need to have a good understanding about the company before they even have a decision to make.
Right. So I think there are different levels of campaigns that you need to be running, especially if you're in an ABM mindset. So I'm assuming we're talking B2B, and if you're in ABM, there are levels of campaigns that are going to be running that are really focused on some key strategic accounts where you work very closely with the sales team. Then you have clusters where you do some programmatic work. And then you have accounts that have the potential to be on the market but are not there yet in terms of intent, etc., where you can run awareness campaigns. And that's where your brand is really critical, having a clear messaging and positioning, having strong statements that are making it obvious what you're about. Very often, I work with tech companies that are, infrastructure, AI, cloud, those kind of topics that are sometimes complex. And when you look at advertising, sometimes it's very hard to understand what a company is about in the first 3 seconds. And you go on their website and you have to scroll endlessly before you understand what they're doing. So running those campaigns and creating a brand where it's very clear who you are and who you're for, I think that's the basic of how your ABN machine is going to work, because you want to get those unaware people to a stage where they're aware about you, and then with intent data you can identify the acceleration that's going on, and you can move them up in your campaigns, really adjust and create some kind of journey for them until they're ready to have a conversation with you. So for me, yes, of course, there is a need to have a strong brand and brand campaigns going on.
Very good. I forgot if I shared this, but the fractional leadership poll. So a little mix. So tried it, effective, looking into it. I think that's probably pretty typical out there. I think what I've heard, I think there's more successes than not out there, and a lot of people haven't tried it yet. So I think it makes
More work
sense.
for us.
All right. So, did I share that? Okay, at any rate. Now the final poll. Want to get into technology and AI and so forth. So, and data. So, here launched. So, I'll launch this poll on leveraging data and AI and B2B lead gen. So, tell me about what have you seen out there as far as the benefits and challenges of leveraging data and AI? And I'm assuming it's first party data, but a combination of first party, third party.
Well, so yeah, I was mentioning, in Europe, everyone has been dealing with GDPR for so long, etc. There is definitely a need to think about how you're leveraging that technology and that data based on your brand. So what I mean by that is privacy is not just a legal aspect, it's also an emotional aspect, a trust aspect. And there are very different levels in terms of how people are protecting themselves. There can be setups related to browsers and operating systems restrictions. There are also buyers having very different behaviors. So in instance, in Europe, people are going to make sure that they're protecting their data way more than in the US. In the US, I think that a majority of people, if they knew that they were getting more personalized content, would be completely okay sharing their data. In Europe, not that much. And so you need to find the right balance between those different behaviors. And there's also company policies. Since we're in a B2B world, some companies are going to protect their employees' data. And the last thing is you also need to consider which systems you're going with, where they have different restrictions in terms of data usage. Like LinkedIn, for instance, is very protective about data in some ways. And so you should consider the use of technology and advertising as a way to be ethical and matching with your brand. So I see a lot of companies wondering, for instance, should we go on that wagon where everyone is switching to AI SDRs? Um, if your brand is all about being personable and creating a relationship with your customers, I want to say probably not, right? Because that's the first interaction they're having. If it's with the bot, I'm not sure you're conveying what your brand is about, right? And so when you think about all of the different possibilities to capture data, there is obviously a lot out there to identify intent signals, etc. And some companies have no issue really jumping the gun and moving too fast with their marketing campaigns. So, for instance, last week I went on a website for a second on the homepage, did nothing, no interaction with the website whatsoever. Yet I received in my inbox an email from that company. I don't know how they were able to pull that off, but I find that hyper aggressive. And I was very surprised by that.
I'm
So
sorry, you found it to be what?
very aggressive in terms of
Yeah,
how they're going after me spending two
right.
seconds on their homepage, not sharing any data. Boom, I have an email in my inbox a couple of days later.
So aggressive as in spooky, not
Yes.
not a
Yes.
good feeling, or good for them. They're being
I thought it
proactive
was
on.
too much. I am a marketer and I'm not I'm
Yeah,
definitely part of those people who feel like you can get better information if you share your data, but
yeah,
that was a bit too far for me.
yeah.
I didn't show enough engagement for them to show up in my inbox and solicit it like that. And I think maybe that's my French traits that are coming out. I don't know, but I think you need to really think about what level of trust are you creating with your consumers and your customers with their data, because that reflects on their perception on your product. And so when you think about using AI, I always say, depending on the level of interaction you're going to have with the outside world, that's where you need to bring in more human. So for instance, if you're using AI to write content that is going to be transactional, totally fine to use 100% AI. But if you're trying to create content for an executive that is a prospect and you want it to be really thoughtful, you need to bring back that human kind of editorial action point of view in what AI is producing. And so there needs to be a different level of engagement with AI based on the intention that you have. I think AI is everywhere. I've been using AI for years. I've actually been launching AI campaigns for NVIDIA before NVIDIA was famous by all standards, and so for me it's really an endless way to think about how can I make AI useful for the company and useful for my team. I've been on conversations with operations people that are really rethinking how they run marketing campaigns, for instance, and that is really creating automation in a way that I had not seen before. And that's really impressive. Does it mean that marketing ops people are going to disappear? I don't think so. But it's really enabling you to think about all of the things that you're doing as a marketing organization in a different way. And let's face it, marketing is a collection of small details, endless details that no one else understands in the organization. We're always short on resources. We're always short on time. So for me, AI is really going to enable us to spend more time thinking strategically, getting things done right, and not be so much in the rush and always running after time. So I see that as something very positive, but with the risk of, okay, is it going to hurt my brand if I do it the wrong way? So very careful about that. The other aspect that I'm also very interested in is, how can I use AI to be smarter about our positioning and messaging? So there's this whole debate, that SEO is going to go away. I don't buy that. I don't think that Google is going to disappear. I think people are going to change the way they search. Um, you know, a while ago, Twitter came up and people started looking for local information on the moment when things were happening because Google could not offer that level of information. I think AI is going to be similar in a way where yes, some people are going to use AI for search for pretty much everything. And we've seen Perplexity position themselves already with e-commerce and thinking about how to monetize their search. It's coming. Google is no longer going to be the only place where you can find information and have advertising running, etc. But some people will still at some point want to have their own view of your website to find certain resources or to review things with human interactions. And so things are going to change, and we need to learn from how people are adjusting their behavior. I think there are tools that are starting to pop up that are going to share what people are looking at in AI, and that's very insightful. I think it's going to help with product marketing. I think it's going to help with messaging. I think it's going to help with understanding local markets if we're able to divide, based on local. Um, we're still light years from being able to analyze all of that. But I think that's going to be uh, the next wave to ride, for marketers. And we've done that so many times already. We're used to adjusting, adapting, and rethinking how we do work. The only risk is it's going so fast, and we need to keep being aware all the time of everything that's changing. Um, it becomes something incredibly important for all marketers out there to think about how much time they're able to dedicate to training. I've always picked a topic every year that I wanted to dive into to really accumulate more knowledge in how marketing is working and become a full stack marketer. But I think now it's not on a yearly basis that you need to think about how to train and gain new skills. It's really becoming on a monthly basis a need that needs to be addressed by everyone on your team. Not thinking about continuous learning is really going to position you at the bottom of the ladder.
Always on.
Mhm.
So if anybody wants to chime in on why they, what they're doing with the AI and data, that would be interesting to us. Brainstorming, I think, and I use AI for brainstorming a lot. And again, it's not perfect, but just to get me to think about different ideas and look at things from a different perspective. So ideally, from the audience's perspective, right, from who you're trying to read, how can you write something that will resonate with this audience based on what we know about them?
You know what I love to do? Sometimes I have to drive all the way south of Silicon Valley and traffic can be rough. So I use the app on voice mode and I have a conversation throughout the drive and we brainstorm on different topics and campaigns and things. And it's
Which app do you use?
Chat
And,
GPT. You
and
can
what accent do you use for
uh,
them?
weirdly, I speak in English, and I realized that some other of my friends are actually speaking in French using the voice thing, and it can switch very easily. So sometimes I'll speak in French when I'm doing brainstorming on personal stuff.
I like that I like that whole conversational
Hmm.
aspect. I think that's terrific. Yeah, and it makes your drive go faster.
Yes, and when you're finally arrived, you have everything in writing, so it's really perfect.
So how would one use AI to optimize campaigns? What are some of the types of things?
Oh gosh, there are so many ways. It really depends on your tech stack. But for instance, if you have your ABM campaigns run with Rollworks, they have the ability to really adjust your campaigns to your accounts and your segments and learn from what is going on in terms of adapting your budgets, etc. You have AI with Zoom Info that really helps you rethink your segmentation and your target lists, etc. There options with AI everywhere right now. There's not a single company that's not bringing AI to what they're doing. So it's really a matter of where do you want to dive first. Um, I think step one for me is to enable the sales team in being smarter about what accounts they're going after so that they don't lose their time with dead cold accounts. So anything that is going to help me with account scoring, account segmentation is a number one step. And then making the marketing team more efficient with messaging and more efficient with how we're spending dollars, because right now budgets are tight for a lot of companies. That's the second step that I want to take.
And how close are we to one-to-one messaging?
Well, it depends on what your budget is like in terms of tech stack. That's still, something that can be done, I think, in a smarter way when you have a budget that is not the budget of a small startup. Um, Unless you put all your eggs in one basket, obviously. But
And what have you seen as far as the audience didn't chime in on them, but as far as coding, my understanding is software is going to go away, that it's all going to be AI, custom
I'm
custom platforms.
I'm reading that a lot, and yes, there are options out there to be able to develop a lot. And I think for a lot of companies that rely on their own engineering team to develop marketing specific programs, etc., that is going to be helpful. Um, does it mean that all software developers are going to lose their jobs? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
I'm really not, a pessimistic person. I don't think that the ground is going to break in a couple of years and everyone is going to lose their job. I think we're going to work very differently. And the expectation for me is companies are just going to want us to do more. If we go faster, they're just going to ask us to do more because everything is accelerating constantly, and we've seen that with COVID. We've seen that where everyone needs to be always on and always delivering more and more and more. And so, yes, we're going to have tasks that disappear. I think that the hardest part is going to be for young graduates who lack experience, because the entry level positions are going to be the ones that are automated a lot. So it's going to be hard for them to jump into that level where you have enough experience to have more meaningful projects. But outside of that, I don't think anyone is going to really lose their job if they're able to keep up with what's going on.
Yeah, what I've heard is people won't lose their job to AI, but they will lose their job to someone who embraces AI.
Right. I've heard that a lot. The other thing I heard recently, which I really enjoyed, was either you're going to have AI work for you or you're going to work for AI.
That's right. That's right. I agree.
So,
And let's see. Oh, Tom. By the
sorry,
way,
quick
this is
question.
we're gonna be wrapping up soon. So if you want to chime in on your final thoughts, and then I'll ask Julie for hers.
That's why I wanted to jump in. I actually have a question of Julie this time, and not a final thought. And that is this: on let's say a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you with AI, particularly for automation and email automation? Because I've actually had to correct so many people when I get emails. I can say this is obviously coming from AI. So, what is your confidence about AI and particularly the automation space?
I think a lot of people are jumping on that right now, and you have very different players on the market. You have some very cheap and young solutions that are affordable that people have no issue using. Um, I question that decision. Like I said, it all depends on what you're paying for and what your budget is like. There are, solutions out there that are much better. And then it also is a matter of how is your operations going on, and what is the quality of your data? How are you making sure that you're putting in place the right automation with the right segments and the right tokens? And, that takes a lot of time. And that's why I'm saying marketing ops people are not going away.
Right.
There's
Thank
a
you for
lot of
that.
work to be done for them, before they can really relax and
Yes,
not do anything.
absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Tom. All right, Julie. I think it's been a nice discussion. Thank you for joining. We're bumping up against my self-imposed deadline. Any final thoughts, any words of wisdom before I let you go?
Um, Look, I want to preach for my own model. I think fractional is really the way to go right this moment for a lot of companies, because we're helping companies create an acceleration with growth, and we're bringing leadership, we're bringing uh, speed and execution that is harder when you have someone who's full-time and not used to jumping like we are. I think, having alignments is more important than having the right campaigns. Too often, leaders are expecting a collection of campaigns and rapid execution, when sometimes it's better to just take a break and make sure we're all speaking the same language and pushing in that same direction. And maybe my last final thought is about data, like we were discussing. All of those tools are great, but trust is the strategy. And so you need to think about how your tech stack is creating that trust, how you're still enabling your brand to be positioned with the right values. And I love technology. I'm always on a beta program for someone, an early adopter, etc. But make sure you're not ruining all your branding efforts with that. Um, and then, yes, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. Always happy to share insights, discuss, review. I'm my biggest issue is to say no to exciting projects. So reach out to me if you want to run anything by me.
Beautiful, Julie. You mentioned trust, and that seems to be a key for all of the topics that we talked about today.
Definitely.
It's a big piece. Beautiful. Thank you for joining. It's been a nice discussion. Best wishes to you and to everyone out here, and thank you again. Have a great day.
For having me.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.